So what is this, episode 46, I think? Sounds right. Of Radio Free Innsmouth Oldie on the 8 bus. And it looks like we've got a classic example of melodic Finnish black metal. A genre the country of Finland is very famous for. And, you know, it's pretty laid back with the slowly waltzing 3-4 beats and such. And the very atmospheric keyboards giving it a nice foresty feeling. But this is not the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about this week. This week, we will be discussing one of the original Finnish black metal bands, Impaled Nazarene. So Finnish metal is very strange because it's all either hyper melodic and very epic and just kind of consonant, nice sounding, or else it's complete and utter filth, like Impaled Nazarene. This is off their first album. Came out in 1993, called Tol Kormte Norse, which means under the sign of 666. And it's very grindcore and punk influenced, but it's also definitely evil black metal. Somehow this entered like the Finnish equivalent of the top 40 when it came out. I guess they were really starving for a competitor to the Norwegian black metal scene that was taking place a couple countries to their west. In addition to their sonic extremity, they're known for pushing the genre conventions forward with just how dark and dissonant and evil sounding black metal can get, and their ideology matches that, where they're very fervent anti-communists, anti-gay, anti-pretty much everything, which has gotten them in trouble with the authorities several times. In fact, they were on the French label Osmos, which were sort of like the major black metal record label at the time, and the French government decided to ban their third album, Suomi Finland Perkele. Translate that, it's a good time. But they fucked up and removed their second album from stores instead. That second album, however, is probably their best one. That one is called Ugra Karma, and it's kind of the beginning of this sort of equating of like nuclear fire with the coming of Kalki and Hinduism and that kind of stuff. As far as black metal goes, I want to say they were the first to do that. Nuclear war has always been a major topic of discussion in the metal community, but the first band to bring it into spiritual focus, specifically sort of a Vedic focus, would undoubtedly be Impaled Nazarene on their Ugra Karma album. Gods of blasting rudimentary black metal, Impaled Nazarene return with a more complex sound that supports their apocalyptic mentality, as witnessed on this album's diatribe against the merciful hippie neutrality of religions while our world is in the throes of our murder. And if the screeching goat voice of the album cannot etch that into your mind, nothing can. Perhaps the most fascist sounding black metal ever recorded. This music works by creating streams of melody, which conquer various spaces of sound, causing them to be calibrated to the march-like robotic percussion, which drives the mechanistic and violent aspect of the music forward. Phrase sequencing and fundamental rhythms originate out of hardcore punk, with an acceleration via black metal rage. That was how Brett Stevens described this album. I read that review, like 10 years ago maybe? Probably more than that, shit. And it still holds true. This is very fascist sounding black metal with an insistent sense of melody over downright minimalist and brutal percussion, just a constant blast. But it also goes into some expected areas with the melody. Like this part. which has sort of a weird bagpipe-style guitar lead being played over clanging acoustic guitars that remind me a bit of Bathory's Hammerheart album. But it didn't feel like an unnatural shift because the songwriting is good. And then watch how it transitions back into the blasting here. Those vocals are something. It's also a very experimental album with a lot of industrial influences in addition to the hardcore punk and the grindcore. As in this song, Gott ist tot, Antichrist War Mix. The overall vibe here is one of fin de cycle, end of the cycle degeneracy, being overtaken by fire. In this case, satanic fire, but the Impaled Nazarene conception of Satan isn't really a Christian one. It has more in common with the Hindu Kalki idea. It's sort of a destroyer that arises out of the final degenerate age to put an end to it. And you can see this in the song titles like Sadhu Satana, Chaos Goat Law. They have invented their own theology of just goats and chaos and odd Savitri Devi-esque avatars of destruction coming to clean the world. And so they revel in the degeneracy as they pray for its destruction. Sounds like something that a certain podcast out there also does. Another thing you'll notice is that they have a sense of humor to them that isn't normally associated with black metal, even though black metal always has had a bit of a jokey aspect to it. But the way they use humor is they aren't necessarily making jokes for the sake of jokes. It's rather that the world has become so fallen that it's inherently humorous. And so they do this with, they comment on this by using absurdity. For instance, on every Impaled Nazarene the album, there is going to be a song about goats. What's the deal with the goats? Well, Mika Lutinen, I think, how's he pronounce it? Whatever. But he says, our very first EP was called Goat Perversion. And then it continued. Actually, on our website, I asked the question, do you want us to continue having goat songs, yes or no? And everybody except one guy, there's always one fucking guy, isn't there, YouTube, said, yes, continue with the goat song. We want goat songs. So I said, okay, you want more goat songs, and so goat songs you shall get. The thing is that when you are doing a goat song, the song is called Goat Sodomy. You can be sure it's not going to be deep social commentary of our problem. The goat songs will have Satan. The goat songs will have goats. The goat songs will have bleeding rectums. They will have blood and shit, all the things we love and like. He's also said, there is no humor in our music, we are not some fucking joke. If people find my lyrics funny, well, then something is clearly wrong with their heads. So, they've kind of equivocated on whether or not they're joking, or if they're completely serious about everything. But that's part of the mystery behind the band, I think. Because they've got the Finnish nationalist stance with a lot of songs about their winter war. They actually have a song called Healers of the Red Plague. Guess what that's about, guys? Might explain why they've gotten in trouble. They've gotten booted off of festivals for their sentiments. Brett Stevens sums up Impaled Nazarene by saying that it's high-speed black metal / grindcore. Surprisingly, some of it is profound, although most consider this band an amusing commentator through the black metal scene. And I feel like that kind of works even if it's a backhanded compliment. There is great profundity to be found within these compositions, but they are also intentionally absurdist. Their third album, Suomi Finland Perkele, got them in extra trouble because there's a song called Winter War where they sort of recreate parts of that famous Total War speech from some German guy. They do a little bit of that and change it to be about the Winter War. And overall, that one it's just very obviously patriotic towards Finland, and you can't be pro-nationalist. You couldn't even do that back in 1995 when that came out. 94 or 95, I can't remember. It was something like that. But this album ups the melody quotient even higher to the point where this is where Brett Stevens kind of falls off the Impaled Nazarene bandwagon. I still think it's pretty good. It's definitely not as complex as Ugra Karma or Tol Kommt the Norse, which are like the two classics. But it does an interesting job of switching back and forth between really primitive, brutal black metal and more melodic stuff. So we got that super dissonant, primitive riff laid on top of straight up sewing machine blast beats. The vocals aren't quite as hateful and insane as they were on Ugra Karma, but they're definitely still pretty out there, even for black metal. And the transition into melody, done seamlessly for dramatic effect. This particular riff gets stuck in my head pretty often, that old melodic one right there. So those are the three albums that established Impaled Nazarene as a force to be reckoned with in the black metal world. After that, they got rid of their guitarist because they didn't really like the melodic direction he was taking them in, and they went even further back into their punk roots. So like the fourth Impaled Nazarene album, Latex Cult, is almost a straight up like crust punk album with song titles like Motor Penis with the little umlaut over the O, very Motorhead. Check out that bass sound, YouTube. This is like straight up punk metal hybrid. Very good stuff. Not as profound as their earlier material, but still very much worth listening to. With lyrics about a motor penis. So a bit of absurd humor in there. The album after this, Rapture, sort of combines that new punk direction with a little bit more black metal. According to Brett Stevens, that's the last good Impaled Nazarene album, and I will agree, there is a pretty stark division between their career pre the album that came out after Rapture, Nihil, and the album that came out, all the albums that came out after that. Their earlier stuff had sort of a macrocosmic weight to it with the weird Hindu symbology mixed with a very different take on Satanism than you usually see in the black metal genre, with a lot of fascism and such. Their later stuff is definitely more concerned with just having sick riffs and rocking out, but it's still all pretty good. But that would be Impaled Nazarene in a nutshell. If you're going to get one album, definitely check out Ugra Karma. It's not terribly accessible music, but if you can really let that album open up to you, there's a lot to be gained from it. Until next week, this has been Radio Free Innsmouth.